So, for a project, I've been tasked with thinking about something I strongly believe in. I strongly believe that Russia is wrong in attacking Ukraine. I don't think that I'm alone in this belief. I don't think that that's an uncommon belief. But I do feel like the rest of the world is set to suffer now because of what Vladimir Putin has decided to do with Ukraine. My project idea was to create something that tells the story of this. And I think that the best way to do this is visually. I mean, war is a visual thing. War is a animalistic, a guttural expression of man's rage and dissatisfaction with his lot in life. I'm not speaking out of my ass. I've been to war. I've been to war twice. There's always a hidden cost. My task to you, the viewer, is to find the hidden cost in my work while I tell a story about my experience in Iraq. The story I'm going to tell is the day I got my combat action badge. I was working the night shift in the detainee holding area, which is where enemy prisoners of war who were not quite at the echelon of prisoner of war status yet, I was their medical coverage. So if we had a convoy bring in a bunch of, bad guys that they suspected of bringing bombs in, it was my job to make sure that, if they were injured while they were being captured, or, I hate to say it, but it happens, if U.S. forces were intentionally rougher than necessary with detained Iraqi citizens, it was my job to fix them up. That was my job. It wasn't. I take pride in the fact that I did a good job, that nobody died under my care. Basically, that I ran a clean DHA, free of any kind of corruption, as best as I could do. I worked third shift, so my night started at 8 o'clock and it ended at 4 in the morning. Sometimes I worked 12-hour shifts, which was also okay because it was an overnight shift, so I wasn't really out in the heat of the day. I wasn't in really any imminent danger of combat because I worked in an office, just an office in a prison in Iraq. My shift was ending and I was headed to the chow hall when the CRAM, or the counter-rocket artillery and mortar system, started announcing itself that we were going to be taking direct incoming fire. Excuse me, not direct, indirect incoming fire. And this was around the time that the U.S. coalition forces were building a wall out of Jersey barriers around Sadr City in an attempt to keep anybody bad in or out, just kind of so that we had control over who was coming in and out of the city. That was our mission. And I was providing the medical coverage for anybody that got swept up in it along the way. I made a beeline for one of the bunkers that was basically a concrete road culvert just above ground and covered in sandbags to add some additional protection. And I waited there until I was either given the all clear or I was told to sprint to the hospital. I don't remember which happened first. I was probably told to sprint to the hospital first. I got there and we immediately started, having casualties, which isn't something that we weren't trained for. We did mass casualty drills at least once a week where, we'd pretend that we'd have injured soldiers who would wear makeup and fake amputation prosthetics so that we'd have something to practice treating. But that day, none of it was makeup and none of the prosthetics were fake. We got hit with about a dozen improvised rockets launched out of the back of a truck and those improvised rockets were they were basically a mortar shell attached to a large air or oxygen cylinder, which they'd like lop the bottom off of it. And if you've ever played a video game, you know how that works. You lop the bottom off of a tank and the thing goes flying. Well, that's basically what they did, but they attached mortars to them, and 2 of those rockets hit our motor pool area, where we had a giant blob full of vehicle fuel. It didn't end well for the blob. The blob was gone, and there was just a big smoldering crater at the end of it. The real issue is that the people who were working in the motor pool, also got hit with shrapnel and liquid flaming gas. And they came to our aid station, where I, covered in mud and exhausted from a 12-hour shift, started working on them one by one. We triaged the casualties and got them sent off to the next echelon of care as best as we could. And I tell that story to tell this story because after that, things really ramped up. I shouldn't say take no prisoners, but I mean there was the attitude of take no prisoners, where if we found somebody doing wrong, they were not only probably going to be beaten before they got to me in the aid station, but they were wrapped up almost regardless of whether or not we had any kind of evidence on them. I'll never forget the day that a kid, younger than my daughter is now, came across my operating table in the aid station. This was a civilian child, non-combatant, who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, got hit by either a stray bullet or shrapnel or something. But that didn't change the fact that they made it to my aid station and needed to be treated. At that point in my medic career, I had never missed a vein when trying to stick an IV. I missed that kid 3 times. Ultimately, it didn't matter because I eventually got a vein, and the child was alive and stable when I put him on a helicopter with his dad. But that was another thing, like, we had to get a clearance so that the dad could go with the kid on the helicopter. So, like, I can't even imagine being a 3-4-year-old child bleeding because I was in the middle of a war zone and I'm getting stuck on a helicopter and with nobody that I know, that nobody that speaks my language, and then to be told that there's a chance that my dad can't come with me. From the dad's perspective, that's unbearable. To see your kid in pain and there's nothing you can do about it. You don't speak the language of the people trying to help them. It was horrific. But we got that kid on an aircraft, and they got out of my aid station alive and stable. But that's the true cost of war. And if Putin can't see that, then he probably shouldn't be president in Russia, and there's probably something that ought to be done about it. Sorry to be kind of a downer, but it's something I care about, something I believe in. There's never a right answer for war unless it's to stop a war. Now, with that said, I'm going to step back and let you finish watching me butcher this horrific painting of what war's kind of like in my head. The chaos, the two sides that don't have too much that separates them culturally or as a species, as humans, and just pray that it ends soon. Thanks for listening.